Welcome to the Infinity Loop group. Thank you so much for joining us on our adventure of communication and connection. The Infinity Loop of Numinous Love, such an important chapter. We are actually writing another book on this chapter and really diving in to what Numinous Love means to us and how it shows up in our life.
Just how central it is to the Infinity Loop. How in all my coaching, in both of our coachings that we do, we just integrate it as a huge part.
Numinous, the presence of the divine nod, a spiritual force or influence. The eye in which I see God is the eye in which God sees me. Meister Eckhart.
Meister Eckhart.
My own me is God. Saint Catherine of Genoa.
Saint Catherine of Genoa isn't saying we're God, but saying we're not other than God either. It's an interesting distinction.
Well, you always like to say, you are not me, but you are not other than me. Mm-hmm. You know, that phrase. I think that's very much along that same line of, you know, when everyone's talking about, oh, we're all one, oh, we're all connected. I find that to be a great nuance to that statement, right. that you are me, but you are not other than me.
Right. And that would be almost an example of where we have the ego to create a healthy separation and yet not be separate.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
She speaks as one who has experienced divine union, which is really what this whole thing is about. Richard Rohr says divine union is union with what is, with the moment, with yourself, with the divine, which means with everything. Through the process of this book, I encountered numinous love like I never had before. I found my soul hidden in this love. My soul spoke to me from the union with numinous love. Basically what it was this encounter that I had with the divine, and I had to come up with a name. Going, what is this? And I came up with numinous love. So now it's numinous love. At my August 1st visit with my healer, she asked me what that third presence was in the room. And when I say my healer, as I was going through very deep healing from trauma that had come up from a relationship, and it was even manifesting in my body. She was aware of it before I was. She said all she could call it was consciousness, which is really interesting because she was like looking behind me. She's really interesting. You know, she's like a shamanic healer.
The Watcher.
The Watcher. Or, well, that's what's really interesting that you just said that, Riley, because the Watcher is consciousness that sort of belongs to all of us, which then you could say this presence belongs to all of us, right? That's really interesting. Was consciousness showing up as I was moving out of the way? I began to get a glimpse of what was emerging for me. Everything led me toward this move through this veil. And you know what I mean through a veil, right? It's almost between the two worlds, and the physical and the spiritual, or this life and eternal life. Everything led me through this move through the veil in a seduction to a liberation I've longed for as long as I remember. I fought it, of course, for many years because I didn't know how to die a good death until now. And meaning, you know, my ego would resist it because, especially when you've been abused, it's very, part of my desire to go through this veil really led me into being abused, to the spiritual abuse, because I wanted the ego annihilation, but it was coming from so much abuse.
You didn't have the discernment. Is that what caused
well, no,
the abuse?
that's the wild thing, is I always had the discernment, which we'll talk more and more about, but I overrode it because of the shame and what happens in abuse.
Then like maybe would you say that you didn't have an accountability buddy then? And that's why I wasn't free from my own psyche turning on me I didn't have someone looking out for me. I didn't have myself looking out for me, and I didn't have anyone looking out for me. This is very sad. In fact, I have a relative that feels so sad about that, but I never had anyone looking out for me. You do now.
I do now. The gift of the encounter on the rowing machine was moving me along, right? We row our way home. There's something so right about rowing between self-compassion and moving back as the watcher of the watcher into essence for me, and has been a source of freedom and comfort for those with whom I've shared it. We don't get liberated by telling ourselves we should be more like Byron Katie. And if you're not knowing what I'm talking about, Byron Katie is someone, she does the work, but she is someone who is like totally awake, and it's, her teaching is very radical. And the concern that I've had is that her stuff is can be very misused, where we can talk ourselves out of our own discernment. And so we don't get there by pretending and just going, oh, I should be more like this. I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't feel my anger. I shouldn't feel this. That's all very, very dangerous, because that can be spiritual bypassing. And we're trying to take away our humanity and our human experience. It's almost a way of our ego wanting to be all good, right? And not accepting no, this is where we are right now in this moment. We get there through our humanity in honoring our hearts, but without giving our pain the power to tell us we're nothing more than our feelings, stories, and imperfections. We do the work, as Katie calls it, and practice self-inquiry, which is the foundation of her work, is to question the ego mind. You question all the stories, and that's where the suffering is the unquestioned mind. Into our stories that cause us to suffer, but we don't get there by pretending. Some things need deep self-compassion and having compassion for ourselves when we don't do it perfectly. It's the allowing it before letting it go, which Katie is what she goes by. Her work is very much about self-compassion too. So it's beautiful. There were some things going on in my world that bid me to go to essence, to stop identifying with me. I needed to become nothing. Facing this abuse that I was really having to recover from, and how it was even affecting people involved, it was like I had to dissolve into love. I had to find my bigger self in a new way to even transform this and to make the most out of it. During this time, I was going through a dark night of the soul. There are not the feel-good feelings, spiritual comforts, or exciting things going on to give me that oomph. But I was patient in it because I could tell it was doing a very deep work in me. It was quite a humbling time. So this is why, that whole making peace with your inner landscape and sitting with the ordinary and sitting with the blah. It was just, everything was stripped from me. I stayed in the calm, in that blah, like making peace with my inner landscape as I watered the backyard this midsummer day. I sensed this cream-colored field right behind me, like a protection, like an angel with me. I wish to God I could communicate how this experience because it wasn't like, oh, I sensed this. And it wasn't even anything like rowing our way home. It was, as I talked about, is how do you bring to life what this experience was? It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. It's the most real, powerful force of wholeness, love, and eternal awareness. It followed me into the house, and at that moment, all that cost me to get this was worth it. It's the greatest gift I've ever been given. It was the awareness of never being alone and freedom from myself and my stories. It felt like it was mine. And I say, what I was saying in the last podcast is these visitations that I had, I believe, were a direct result to comfort me because of what was coming against me that would, threaten to just take out my fucking soul, And I just, this just going through this dark night of the soul, this is what came up.
I know at the time of when this had happened, you had not tried DMT. And now that you have, to me, this sounds very similar to that same experience.
Talking about
so would you say that the experience you had out in the garden was a DMT experience?
Yeah.
Through...
Yeah, because I was having DMT experiences. I was having that. I remember sitting on the couch one day, and I had this experience. I had this experience of dying, which is what happened. You get all this DMT when you're dying. I can't explain, I'm not saying it right, what happened, but it was like I got the awareness of what it was going to be like when I died. And it was a thing of almost breathing in and having like an orgasm in your brain. And it was like, oh my gosh, death is going to be so beautiful.
Well, I remember the first time you did it, that these were the exact words you used. You said, I felt the love, I felt the wholeness, and the eternal awareness. I mean, I remember exactly, that's exactly what you said when you came out of it. You said, I felt cradled by the universe and felt the eternal love. And so I just thought that was beautiful that you had that experience before ever chemically trying.
And you wanted me to have it because of my experience with Numinous Love.
Yeah.
You said, I think you will really, it will really resonate with you. Yeah. And so that's what's the value of these, having these experiences, is for you to touch on a different reality that is more real than the physical. It's opening your eyes. That's part of being the whole mystical and living in the infinity loop, is you are seeing what is more real, right? Which is love, which is the fabric of the universe. I noticed that it was no longer me loving me, like my reflex of self-compassion or self-care. Numinous Love was doing it all. I'm not able to explain it well because it's all part of us, but it was the awareness of the other. It was very much the sense of this other, this presence. And this other is the best thing in the whole world. It's so interesting right now. You can just kind of bring it up. It's coming more alive, just doing this. I didn't get this because I was being a good contemplative. I'll say what I wrote here, and then I'll say how I see it now. I was struggling at the time to stay present. My spiritual progress seemed to have fallen away. I found my way back by reading this book I was writing, and the stories of my lessons fed me deeply. I realize now it happened because I was so present. It was just I didn't fully understand that I could be present and the way I was seeing my past and my future, but I really was present. And it was just, there was so much going on. I I misunderstood. I actually was being a good contemplative, which I think you need that. You need the silence. You need this to access you, right? You have to make that space. You have to be in the present moment. My new mantra to bring me into the present moment is my soul, because my soul exists in divine union. My racing mind, my flip-flopping from past to future vanished. It was the awareness, like I wrote in It's None of Your Concern, with 7.6 billion people on the planet, now 8, along with the history of civilization, things I was thinking about didn't matter. That's true. This is true. There were things I was thinking about, and this just like shoots you right into, right? Just like DMT, the utter presence. And this presence is focused on what matters. It's eternal to me and exists beyond all this. I had nights where I sensed numinous love bridging a gap between stories and limitations that were keeping me from the leader I longed to be. I don't have a bucket list, but I want to do what's mine to do, to give expression to what's in my heart. Then it got better. I was in the gym again, and I became aware numinous love was intimately with me, behind me. If anyone saw my face, they'd think I was moved by the song in my earphones. It was beyond what I knew of love before that encounter. It was, that's what love is. Yeah. And it was love for Krista. It was beyond the human love I felt for baby Krista in I Had a Dream. It's how much love loves us. Call it whatever you want that resonates with you. I could call it a lot of things that are all so very good. As I edit this, I sense numinous love right behind me. It's the awareness of presence, and it's so weird, Riley. It's just coming back right now. That's the thing about having a spiritual practice where you bring to mind these visions and tools and spiritual experiences that we've ever had in our lives, or that someone else has even shared with you, that you could internalize. Because just bringing that awareness, I'm in that space, and it's so beautiful.
Well, the awareness to the tool creates the environment for you to use the tool more frequently, right? And so just reminding ourselves that this is a tool in our spiritual tool belt reminds us to start using it again.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about how the psychedelic work and how it's all the effectiveness, I believe, is all based on how you integrate it. And that would be, instead of people having these states where it creates stages, right? And that's something Ken Wilber teaches. You can have a mystical state, but stages are earned. And we get to these stages by doing our work, but also into coming back and integrating and renewing our mind with what is true. We don't have to live in fear and scarcity, but we can live in the infinity loop, in this abundance where we are held and called and named by love.
Yeah, I think the quote is, be wary of unearned wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I would say for all the people that try and use things to elevate your experience, to have a spiritual experience, know that all these tools can go there. I don't believe that there's ever a all good or all bad tool, especially in the spiritual space. Mm-hmm. I think they all come at a cost, and we just need to be aware of that cost. And sometimes it's not necessarily a cost, but opportunity that could go either way. And that's why integration is so important.
Yeah. Would you say cost? Would you call it maybe consequence? Because we even talked about anything. We talked about fasting, breath work, cold.
Yeah, I mean, I was
ecstatic dance.
I was saying how anything can have its dark side.
Shadow.
It's right. Like, yes, we talk about how fasting is so great. Yet, if you fast yourself to having a eating disorder, you know,
or the spiritual experiences can cause you to be very ungrounded.
Right. I mean, you could be only searching for that spiritual experience and you're never integrating that knowledge into your life
and doing the deep
and then you just live in a cave being like, oh, I'm in touch with God. Okay. Yeah. But that only serves you. You're not really helping out in the world because you are separate from the world.
And so the what I'm coming back to with the value of numinous love as, well, how the hell does this affect connection, awareness, and inquiry, and leadership and communication, is it completely does, because it changes the quote at the beginning, the eyes at which I see God is God seeing me, and then I see other people and I see myself, and contemplation is how you see the world through God's eyes, and that will change, that kind of mirroring will change anyone and anything.
Well,
can change.
For me, what resonates with the importance of remembering numinous love is with us always, is then remembering the power that it gives us to communicate from love.
Yeah.
Right? If numinous love is with you and watching you, how would you ever not communicate from love? Right? Like if you knew that this most loving presence you've ever experienced is with you, why wouldn't you communicate from love? And I think that's just a good reminder to keep practicing.
And we'll talk more about, but Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote, she's a neuroscientist, but she writes on these 4 different quadrants of the brain. And one of them is the right logical brain, which is really numinous love. It's the part that's all is well. It's the mystical brain that we all have, but we need to get in touch with. So even if you don't, aren't spiritual leaning as much as we are, it's just seeing it from the very structure of how we were created to be able to have that mystical view.
Well, when you talk about
whole brain,
when you talk about the parts of our brain and kind of how we understand to use it for a more spiritual awareness, it's like the part where you can't worry and be grateful at the same time, because it's the same part of your brain. So anytime
and worry and be curious at the same time,
right? So the same types of thing, and there's a lot of different thoughts that can't be done at the same time with these things. And so it's so important to remember, okay, how do I go back to inquiry? How do I go back to these states so I am not staying in this worry state or fear state?
I love it. I'd been dealing with the reality that getting a message like this out would require me to rise to a new level. The thought of marketing myself online was overwhelming. Love said, do it for Krista. Numinous love would help me show up for my life in the most courageous way. Step into the field where I'm more than I thought I was and become what I write about for my encounters with spirit. I'd say it's 5 years, a little bit later, but we are doing it. At that moment, I was numinous love, showing up for Krista. I am both aware of the other and the other being me. And the way we teach this is that, I think we've already talked about it on other podcasts, but it's this awareness of numinous love is this presence that is loving the part of me that is struggling. And then you realize, wow, I'm now aware that I am not overly identified with that, but I'm aware of the watcher. And then what happens is you go, wait a minute, I'm not other than that. And then you go, I am the watcher. I am numinous love. And that suffering, it's like putting little balm on that suffering. And then you're like, whoa, I am numinous love. So the very wound that gets us in touch with our pain is the doorway into our infinite self. You're like, whoa, what is this numinous love? Wow, I'm not other than this.
Well, the suffering is the feeling of lack, the feeling of fear,
separation. Yeah. Our little human, little poor little ego-fried self.
And once you feel that connection to the numinous love, you no longer feel the separation, and you get overwhelmed with that feeling. That
love, which is, yeah. I wept in the gym when I experienced that intensely personal love for me. If I never experience that again, it will stay with me. This encounter and the now ubiquitous awareness is causing the biggest transformational change in me. It's not our ego, it's the opposite of it. It marches to the beat of a different drum. It's here for another reason. It's energized by that reason. It knows everything will be provided for. It fears nothing and loves everyone. It's interesting. Leo he didn't understand why I would say it's the opposite. He was like, how can it be the opposite? Because I think his awareness of non-duality is that like it would be like integrated, but I don't know another way to communicate it. It felt like it was absolutely the opposite of the ego. And I know like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie they're not into the ego. They're like, that is, really what's getting in the way. So for me, I still see it as it's the opposite of the ego. It's weird. It's this soul force.
Like the yin and yang? Is that what you're kind of referring to, where it becomes all-inclusive, but then there's still the dot in the inside?
Yeah, there's like maybe somehow how it uses your ego is kind of captured by your soul versus your soul being captured by your ego. Maybe it's something like that. I don't know, but it feels very much like, wow, this is not ego energy. This is the power of the soul energy. My deepest me is God. Catherine, and again, St. Catherine of Genoa. Call it our deepest us, our true selves, consciousness, pure awareness, God, the numinous, whatever. I know it wasn't a counterfeit because the fruit of how I see, feel, and behave toward others and myself is also qualitatively different. Now I could not imagine looking upon myself unlovingly. And I think that has stayed true, even if I'm sort of being sober and honest about whatever I'm seeing in myself. I still think that has stayed and has just grown in me. The point I made about the counterfeit is we're going to get into that. There are very counterfeit spiritual experiences that can look like angel of light, spiritual teachers, right? But then you start to look, we were talking the other day about someone we know went down to Peru, got an ayahuasca experience, thought it was so great, and came back so dysregulated. And the fruit of what came out of her was just terrifying. The ego and hatred and fear and control and dishonest, like it just really did a number. And in my cult, I saw some unbelievable counterfeit spiritual experiences, but there was no true love there. While in yoga class the other night, my mind wandered. Then I heard Numinous Love say, I love you. I recognize the quality of which she speaks. It permeates everything. The awareness is the great interrupter and shifter of consciousness. It instantly centered me into the present moment and all the distractions vanished. I stayed in each moment with this awareness, which is interested in the present, not in the things that distract me. I heard it repeatedly. I could feel the instruction of the teacher along with the centering power of her love. When I did veer away from the present moment later on in the class, when the I love yous subsided, I felt the response in me saying, I love you, automatically rise up. I set it back to presence, God, infinite love, or whatever one calls that which one cannot help but love. Me saying I love you had the same effect. Being loved so intimately and being loved so intimately back became the infinity loop of love and fullness that makes all things possible. Hearing the way I love you went through me, it was a love I knew for the first time. Love is loving every inch of who I am. Talk about healing trauma. Because it also goes through your whole body. And that's why, again, the whole psychedelic or certain these modalities that they heal trauma because they go through somatically, all the different parts and just washing out and renewing and healing the trauma in the body. The next morning in yoga, I did the I love you to Numinous Love. I became aware of what happens with that now and happened the night before. It doesn't feel as though I'm giving love to God, as though God is separate from me. It's as though the love is looping back to me like an infinity loop.
Also like the water wheel.
Like the water wheel.
We love our imagery, and the water wheel is definitely one.
And this is interesting of where I so differ from where a lot of the evangelical and charismatic church is they very much believe in the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, which has also been, other words used for consciousness. But it's this longing for God in this aching of how much God is separate from them. And the mystics would be, and in all the different kinds of traditions, this awareness of of divine union, of whoa, I am not separate from God.
The imagery I always liked is that we are the fingers of God, and so it was a finger. It might feel separate because it's out here, but at the end of the day, it's still a part of the whole body.
I'm giving love to God as though God, it says, it doesn't feel like as I'm giving love to God as though God is separate from me. It's as though the love is looping back to me like the infinity loop. It's truly as James Finley says, even though I'm not God, I'm not other than God either. The way of the mystic is the experience of divine union. It's the contemplative heart that also experiences others with the awareness of oneness. It sees others' beauty. The same way I use the mantra, my soul, I now use, I love you. Before, when I'd say, I love you in meditation, it was me doing the centering and working it. Now there's a grace that brings the depth of the reality of being loved and being loved as something that just is. I now experience love looking through my eyes at myself all the time. This was in 17. I can't say that happens all the time now, but just the more I touch on it and bring it back, I can just go there. That's the thing. That's why having a spiritual practice and meditation and bringing back, bringing God is behind my eyes now, looking out at the world, right? Before, when I'd say I love you, it was okay, me doing that. Now I now experience love looking through my eyes at myself all the time. Love is loving me tenderly as I pull a sticker off a folder. That was what was happening. As I wash my body, eat my food, as I fumble through life, it's the other whose presence is not just me. May I see the world with the tenderness of numinous love, even as I hold my discernment, right? It's not a good comparison, but this did come to mind. I experience an almost overwhelming infilling when I coach and connect. This is what we're talking about, the water wheel, because the brain's reward system with the neurotransmitters is through the roof for me. I feel like I'm walking around on drugs to a delightful degree. I think that's why part of the psychedelic brain is I just have a lot of access to my neurotransmitters. So everything is, the chemical reactions, which we can learn to turn on ourselves in our physiology. I feel like I'm walking around on drugs to a delightful degree. In this way, I'm a drug pusher. I try to sell people how to unleash their own brain's chemicals that give them what they seek on the outside. When I love and quote unquote see people, I get filled. Pouring into others feels like I'm pouring into me. We're looped together in the infinity loop. Now this would be the past 17 plus years. Most of the time when I coach someone, it feels like everything I do to the other, I do to myself. It's very much like we're one in the connection. That's why it doesn't drain me, but keeps filling me up more and more. And I was reflecting on that, and the only time I don't feel that was like the stop is when I'm dealing with somebody very high in narcissism. There's no flow there. I'm addicted to the connection and all that happens when we enter into the infinity loop. We gain access through our hearts, the desire to love. That's it. We get access through our hearts, the desire to love. Everything is our desire to love well. That is the open door. That is hungering and thirsting after righteousness. Jesus said, they will be satisfied. Is we have to want to love well. We know love is who we are. We want to play in that world of being who we truly are. Giving and receiving love feels like the same in that world. God, I was just hearing, it was so interesting. Aaron, what's his name? Who does the oneness? Branky, what's his name?
I don't know his last name, but Aaron, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And he was talking about it's like the giving and the receiving. It's both. And I'm like, oh, wow. In that in enlightenment, when we're not just receiving from God, like we're giving. It's like, it's just the both.
Well, it was like that example I used at the last podcast of when I was hurting the most and sitting in my own suffering and my own pain, and I chose to look for someone else to help. And as soon as I started helping someone else, my own suffering went away, and I was able to be of service to someone else.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Giving and going down this rabbit hole is worth it. We land in this magical field in Wonderland. May I never lose the awareness or forget how much we're all loved, even as I go through the other dark nights of the soul. When we're stripped, let us remember that the absence of those feelings, right, of the good feelings, is also love doing a deeper work in us as we surrender to not knowing. We get used to being dislodged, and that's okay because we let go to be filled with more love. Tim Farrington says the dark night of the soul is about a kind of unconditional love that wakes us up and affirms our deepest humanity. So it's actually love when we're kind of stripped from those, feel-good feelings, going through that dark space of unknowing. We love and honor our vulnerability with tenderness, humility, and solidarity, right, with everybody else who's suffered. What a beautiful dance it is to love and embrace our heartaches, along with the grace to transcend our struggles. That would be just another reflection point, and I want to be very sensitive how I say this, but this would be where when someone is suffering, and medication now is so ubiquitous for anxiety and depression, and We're so afraid of somebody feeling low when their lowness, depression, can change in a moment when they are heard and seen, but how we're stripping people of an opportunity to go through these beautiful spiritual times of opportunities sometimes when we medicate.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think you're kicking the can down the road. I don't think you're solving a problem. I think you're creating a bigger problem later in your life, So taking these medications doesn't solve the problem. It just pushes it down the road. And then if anything, the problem then just starts building on itself because you aren't solving it, because you are putting it to the side chemically, because that's chemically what these things do. They block off receptors to your brain so you don't get overwhelmed by the emotions that are connected to them. They don't disappear. They're waiting for you to get off of them to then rush your whole system. And that's why it becomes worse and worse the longer someone is on them for them to get off of them. That's why the most common side effect is suicide after it, and it isn't because of the drug, it's because of all the pain and suffering someone has been stuffing for so long doesn't disappear, it just waits.
Well, they could say they were on and why they were doing their deeper work, but I think it also so it can also be how it alters the brain.
I mean, yeah, if you are doing the deeper work, but I've rarely see someone doing the deeper work that are on those medication because the medication makes you so numb, you lose the ability to do the work. Just from my experience, everyone has their own journey, whatever helps them get there.
Yeah.
But from what I see coming from people, like you said, the fruit of the tree, the fruit of the tree that comes from people that are on these, from my experience, is rotten fruit.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say I would love for other people to find other ways to find support that doesn't permanently change their sleep architecture or affect their brain or do things to their ability to discern the ramifications of the decisions they're making or have them miss out on spiritual opportunities. I think we're so afraid of seeing someone in their sadness and pain, and knowing how things can, I think it's very frightening. But because we're also very frightened as a society of knowing how people can actually, things can move in how we. But I also remember it was a naturopath who gave me, the trauma was coming up so intense. He gave me like 6 benzos or whatever for emergency, and that it certainly helped me when I was going through what was coming out of my system. But I was also doing like the deepest work.
Well, and I think there's a difference when you are in the fire, in the heat of the moment, and it's a difference between something that you use to maintain your life, right? That's the people that come to me and go, oh, I haven't been able to cry happy or sad tears. It's their entire emotional system, the entire spectrum of it is being turned off.
That happened to
and
me.
That I don't know anyone that's been on it for a long period of time that it doesn't happen to. To me, that's one of the saddest things, to lose the ability to cry happy or sad tears, is just one of the most human experiences that is really sad to get taken from you.
Yeah. To live our most courageous lives and be the best we can be in what matters to us isn't about being special. This is interesting that I'm bringing this up. Carolyn Mace says, none of us are special, but all that's special lives inside of us. And I know she's been criticized for that, and and I love the way she says that. But, well, okay, someone's we're special. Okay, we're special to each other, but
well, what comes up to me is she's saying this special aspect of you is your connection with the universe, your connection with God. You as an individual, as a human being, is not special, but your human experience and connection with the divine, that is what makes you special, right? That is where people's talents truly come from, not as an individual, but the connection to the divine.
Yeah, like everyone's unique. Okay, so in that sense, quote unquote, we're special. But she's really what she's pushing on the pedal of all the spiritual narcissism of people coming and going, I know I have such a special calling, and you just, the little plaques that are sold and people have in their house, anything but ordinary and, so special. And this need to feel special, I think she's picking up, is really coming from, the ego. My experiences do not make me special, but they help me be more in service. Thomas Merton, like Carolyn Mace, was a big fan of accepting we are ordinary and saw the freedom in that. Again, that's the ego dissolving. That's I'm ordinary. I'm ordinary and I'm
beautiful.
Infinite. Yeah, it's like beautiful. So I love it. Let us make peace with being ordinary and enjoy the sweet solidarity of our ordinariness. Spiritual experiences aren't about making us feel special. The cult leader I knew now was 40 years ago, thought all her counterfeit experience made her special. They just fed her raging ego. Spiritual experiences are for us to learn to love and see others from the fullness we experience. They woo us to give our lives away. The more we experience the real, the love, the utter acceptance, we have that to give from, lead from, and keep us from needing others to give us what we already have. My desire is to help others find this love that lives inside. That's your desire. That's the Infinity Loop Group's desire. We go through the veil into another realm. We drop into each moment more frequently when we don't feel we're the one that has to hold it all. Numinous love is looking out for us. That's when you say, even how the universe is looking out for me, even when I'm screwing up, has my best interest in heart, even when I don't. Make stillness your friend. Remove yourself from distractions and sensory overload and be alone with yourself. Don't run from the humbling. It's worth it. We find our deepest love there, and what lies inside can never be taken from us. That's again, I was thinking about why I do this walking meditation and why I'm such a solitary is that it's so interesting on the inside to be communing with God. Someone has to be really interesting for me to want to, to compete with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as we go into our reflection questions, what does numinous love mean to you? We've really been breaking it down about our experience with numinous love and how it's affected our life. But this is a great opportunity to reflect on what we talked about and see how it registers with you. In what ways do you see your persona or false self as different than this love? Reflection is so important, and having the view of ourselves is what causes us to grow.
And I would say being able to feel the difference, because I'm not sure people can always feel it's about finding what is the difference between the persona and this. Can you feel into?
You're saying the difference between the real you that comes out sometimes, or the mask we put on to make people happy?
Like Thomas Merton would say, the only thing really real is the true self, right? It's the only thing that lives on. It's the only thing God accesses in that sense.
But I guess if someone feels like they don't know when they are being their true self, how would they know that feeling different?
I think how you would find it is through the meditation. It's the inner stillness. It's the being in the present moment. It's the ability to find when the ego mind is quiet from the chatter, and you find the space, or you are able to witness your small self. Then you're touching in and go, what does that feel like? Do you feel the difference? Do you feel the liberation? Do you feel the free fall? Because it feels like death and life at the same time.
The when you truly love yourself fully. Would you say that is kind of that stepping into that? Yes,
because that part of you, numinous love, that is what authentic self-love is. Because anything else, we are pretty much having to overcompensate for. Even though our small self, we can go, I respect that part of me. I like this part of me. It's a hell of a lot of work.
Well, I think that's very important too. What do you think your soul's purpose or focus is? I think that seems to be an issue with most people in society, is feeling a lack of direction, a lack of purpose, a lack of vision. And I find that the more in tune with numinous love we get, the more that the purpose becomes shown to us.
Yeah, like my purpose, learning how to love well while practicing elegant and intelligent self-care, or encouraging others to embrace life, that they may.
And would you say those are tools?
I can do whatever I'm doing.
Your tools and mantras to stay in this practice?
Yeah, and I could say I could do that of whether or not, however I'm serving people. If I'm sweeping streets, I can be doing my life's purpose for the rest of my life.
Well, I think one of the things...
You never retire from it.
The thing we always talk about is being the light. And, it's great to want to help people, but the people that need help will find us when we are being the light, and the light is what helps. And so I think that's just a reminder for all of us. It's so easy to want to do something big in the world and race out there to do it, when sometimes just being present, the little things can do so much more. They
actually change the world.
Right.
I mean, if they change the world.
And talking about changing the world, let's jump right into this next chapter. It's very important. The alpha woman. When she enters the room, everyone could feel everything was going to be okay. Christophorus. And I think this is very much our definition of the alpha woman. There's so many definitions out there, and I think that
usually
term can be
man. Yeah.
Right. I think that in traditional zeitgeist, at least what I see, is when someone is referring to an alpha woman, they're referring to a woman that is just copying a man. And we would say that is not what being an alpha woman is.
Yeah, my healer said that to me. She said, "You're an alpha woman," and she said it only as a compliment. It's that she thought she thought I was very heart-centered, and the way she described the healthy alpha man and the healthy alpha woman, and it wasn't about dominating. It was about knowing that inner strength, right?
That everything's going to be okay.
Well, and that she affects the field. That's the thing. Is she raises everybody else's vibration when she walks in the room, and she has that inner stillness where everyone can feel, okay, we're in good hands.
A big part of success is keeping your head when no one around you is. Martha Beck.
Mm-hmm. An alpha man means different things to different people, so I'll express the concepts in different language when it comes to men, which we're going to talk about a lot in our strong man program. However, the term alpha woman is clear enough to explore. I've decided to claim alpha woman for what I mean. I think of alpha as in terms of being in an alpha brain state. Just like an alpha woman brings calm into the room because of her peace and alertness, in an alpha brain state, we're both calm and alert. We have the highest chance to solve problems, be creative, be at peak performance, control our emotions, focus, and not shoot cortisol through our systems or through anyone else's.
So good.
It's a wakeful meditation where we connect, create awareness, and use inquiry. In astrology, the female Leo is the most independent of all types. I identify with my lioness nature and it has served me. When I let others shame my Leo assertive confidence, I've suffered and abandoned myself. That would be the alpha. I mean, they are able to be assertive and they have confidence. Now in my early 50s, now I'm in my late 50s, I celebrate my lioness as regal. I don't apologize for being a lioness or an alpha woman. And it's interesting because lions were so a part of my life that I really connected with in my childhood, and they very much helped me. And when I became a Christian, astrology is so of the devil. I just had to let my lioness go, and that use of that animal symbolism, and that was really sad. It actually very much hurt me.
Well, I will say, as your son, I never lost the imagery of the lioness as you, because I never remember you ever not being on the phone and doodling a lion.
Oh,
there's not a memory in my life where you weren't, where you were on the phone and you didn't doodle a lion. So maybe you left the lion, but the lion never left you.
So great. 30 years with men have given me children, partnership, love of men, joy, adventure, and an education in relationships. But I've struggled to not betray myself and how I've over-adapted to men. In some situations, my brain had to be shut down, my light had to be dimmed, my fire had to be smothered, and shame somehow made it all acceptable. Now I push on another pedal. How will I fully be an alpha woman in a relationship with a strong, secure man? If you spend any time with me, you'll feel my fire, my lioness, my alphaness. I've come to appreciate my last name, which means force. I don't want to force, but be a force for love. Now that I'm not concerned with to know my place behind a man, I've been told, I'm not concerned to keep my mouth shut. As a woman in the second half of her life, not just chronologically, but spiritually, it feels beautiful to me to give my heart away to the whole world and not to a relationship.
And I really want to talk about that force again, and how it means even more to us as we've embraced kind of the metaphor of the Jedi and the Sith and the use of force, and how that is something that is always moving through us.
And so, talk about that more, because how you talk about how the Sith is how they use their emotions, which I would say somebody who would not be emotionally sober.
Right. I mean,
stillness.
So the Jedi and the Sith do a lot of the same things, and I think this is kind of talking about where we said our spiritual practices can be taken to either extreme. But ultimately, what separates a Sith from a Jedi is a Sith generates its power from feeling into its emotions, playing the victim, playing into its hate, its rage, its anger,
its fear, its scarcity.
All those low vibration feelings, where a Jedi is all about transcending those emotions. They separate from their connections to be a one divine connection to everybody, right? They're not, they separate them from their family, so they don't have one important connection. They're connected to everybody because they are supposed to care about everybody, not just their parents. And that's that practice that they do. But I think we love that as a metaphor into our own practice.
And that would be the alpha.
Right, the male or female,
and
just the
female.
alpha, to be able to be aware of everything that's going on, but transcend it, not emotionally reactive.
Mm-hmm. The alpha woman is not always well behaved. She joins the table with the men. She's unintimidated by the roles men play. She challenges them in all the right ways for all the right reasons. See, she's not into the toxic femininity, right? That over-adapts and placates and plays men, right? Manipulatively. And I've seen that even in the corporate world where they're just like, you hear these women, they'll just run around and go, I know how to work that man to get what I needed, instead of standing in the divine integrated masculine and feminine and speaking truth. It's like they know how to play men's egos instead of really being a force for good and change. Her goal is that men walk away as better brothers, friends, and partners to the women and men in their lives. She encourages men to be better fathers, leaders, and businessmen, better communicators, and more connected to their hearts. She's not afraid to liberate men from what they are not even aware they want to be liberated from. Boy, is that true. An alpha woman loves men. She's not there to compete, but to be the leader in every interaction, not by dominance, but by influence, with connection, awareness, and inquiry, and advocacy when that's what's needed. She's not afraid. Remember we talked about you can be the leader by the way you ask the questions? And that's a big part of the career coaching, is how you use inquiry to speak up and ask questions, and how you can change the whole field and become a leader to raise people up to a higher level of learning and decision making. An alpha woman especially enjoys her sense of humor. She doesn't apologize for it and knows there are great power and intelligence in the play and wit. She laughs at herself. I think it should have been there is great power. An alpha woman doesn't behave like a man in the business world. She doesn't take counsel from men who tell her she should make decisions like a man. A man can overpower a woman if she abandons her feminine heart that knows when she's procrastinating and when she's letting things flow and not pushing the river. That's that nuance, right? Both the masculine and feminine in us are needed at the table. It's necessary to have all our parts integrated and available to us. Some of us have been in hiding. It's time to be the jeweled elephant that cannot hide. We are Ganesha. In the Hindu tradition, Ganesha is known as the remover of obstacles and the god of beginnings. As Ganesha in the infinity loop, we remove obstacles and make all things new. Ganesha is perfect. Oh, you want to read that?
Perfect equilibrium between force and kindness, power and beauty, discriminative capacity which provide the ability to perceive distinctions between truth and illusion, the real and the unreal.
Mm-hmm. That's seeing, right?
How will you embrace this definition of being an alpha woman and step into it versus how an alpha woman has been portrayed as a dominator or overachiever or not heart-centered? You know, how is this align with how you used to see an alpha woman? How is this a new thing you feel like you can embody? Even as a man, how do we empower our alpha woman? And when I call in my alpha woman, it's how do you have those healthy boundaries and still be loving? You know, how can I tell someone to fuck off in the most loving way possible? And you know, and to me that's how we can embody it. It's yes, my alpha male is coming forward, but to communicate, I'm going to use my alpha female to not
be feminine. Wow.
to override. To me, that's how I've integrated it into my life in that practice. Wow. What images come to your mind that serve you as an alpha woman? Krista?
Well, the lioness, the Force, the Jedi.
Yeah, the Jedi's been a big one.
The
recently.
love that well, for me, it's like I see, I always think about those big budget hero movies, and it's usually the man. And when he walks in the room, everyone knows everything's like, okay, I'm here now. We're going to save this ship, and it's like, it's so grounding. It's like keeping your head together.
So what just actually came to me, because again, this is about like imagery of the alpha female, is actually an old cartoon, the Powerpuff Girls. And it was, everything about them was love and kindness. They were superheroes, but everything, even about their powers, was about love and kindness and connection and being sweet. And to me, I find, yes, that is a cartoon version, but I think is a great visualization of what, that's even that childlike alpha female. At least what comes to my mind right now is that memory. What do you need to incorporate into your life to help you develop these qualities? So, what practices do you need in your life? What accountability buddy do you need that can help you stay in your alpha female or male? Last
thing, I just saw something came in my feed, and it was about how to become, an alpha man. And it was all like, that's a really good thing. And then they used one of the adjectives they said is dominating. And I just thought, that's so interesting. What if we used the power of force in a leadership, in a different way of leadership that was so beautiful, and it was not dominating or shutting other people down, but the capacity to get them to show you their cards. What are they really thinking? What is the intelligence and genius and data and insight they have that they're going to share with you and the company because of you as a leader?
To me, a true alpha man has the ability to dominate, but chooses not to. Right? That's what being a leader is. Yes, I have the authority over you and could totally put you in your place, but instead I choose to uplift you and bring the best out of you. With that all being said, thank you so much for joining us on this adventure, and till next time.